Hi everyone, I'm back, but this time on my lonesome. For this third video, my good friend Simone decided to desert me, so it's me and only me, talking to you today about mindfulness. It's probably a word that I'm sure you're aware of. It's thrown around quite easily because it's such a trendy word to talk about. Essentially, what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is about paying attention to the present moment. It's about being in the present moment, no matter what that present moment brings you, whether it be unpleasant or pleasant, whether it be particular thoughts, sensations, or feelings. It's about being, and being in a compassionate manner. Perhaps a more exact definition, some people would argue, is that mindfulness is all about paying attention. And often when we're paying attention or paying focus or focusing on a particular thing, it's handy to have an anchor for that attention. And you might be familiar with other forms of meditation where people use the flame of a burning candle to concentrate on, or they might use a mantra that they keep repeating verbally that helps them anchor their attention. Alternatively, you could use the very senses that we are constantly using on a daily basis. So senses being, of course, touch and taste, smell and sight and sound. And the added advantage of using these senses as an anchor for your attention is that what we also may be doing is increasing our interoceptive awareness. And what's interoceptive awareness, you're probably asking me? And that is essentially being able to read yourself from the inside, being able to read your body signals. And generally speaking, mindfulness practice is associated with reduced stress, increased focus. Also, interoceptive awareness itself is also associated with better emotion regulation, and also associated with decreased risk of depressive and symptoms of anxiety. So, what's it got to do with being in the kitchen, you might ask? Well, because we can use our senses to anchor our attention, we can use those senses and apply them to what we're playing with in the kitchen. So, in fact, what we're doing is not only cooking with foods perhaps that are stress-busting, but also cooking in a manner that appeals to our senses and paying attention to that. And in that way, cultivating mindfulness as you're cooking. So how am I going to do it? I'm going to do it through putting together a grain bowl for you for this video. And this grain bowl's incorporating all of the colors and the flavors that we've already talked about, and thus incorporating the phytonutrients that are absolutely brilliant for our well-being, and particularly for helping reduce stress. So I'm going to start with, if we were to concentrate particularly on the mindfulness aspects of this preparation, I'm going to notice, and I'm going to ask you to notice, the colors that I've got in front of me. I've got some black barley, so I chose a black barley as opposed to your standard barley to, again, be able to have color that jumps out at you. I've got some yellow corn. I've got some purple onion, and underneath that some red tomatoes. We've got some beautiful red kidney beans, and our green leafies, of course, can't leave those out. And earlier on, lucky for you, that I actually baked up some Brussels sprouts. I've got a particular soft spot for Brussels sprouts because I feel like they've had a bad rap in their life, and people tend to associate Brussels sprouts with steaming them to death and not finding much taste in them at all. But my Brussels sprouts, folks, are glazed in maple syrup and olive oil, and they've been baked off with some cranberries as well. I've got some egg here to add a bit of protein, and a bit of a sauce to go over the top to add moisture to the plate. So what do we start with? Might begin with some black barley. So I'll place that. You can have a grain bowl and maybe have the barley as a basis. But in my case, I'm actually just placing the grain bowl in strips. I sort of like that arrangement. It sort of reminds me of a rainbow. And I might then place the corn. So as I'm placing, I'm noticing the colors and the shapes and the textures that each food here has to offer. I also might notice the temperature. These have all been in the fridge, hygienically in the fridge, so I also notice the temperature of the actual foods as I'm handling them. I might next add some Brussels sprouts. These are smelling particularly good, and they've got the colour of cranberries in them. And I've sort of, there's a little bit of a bit of caramelization that's occurred. So I've got a mixture of the green that I originally started with, but I've created change thanks to the heat. So I've got a bit of brown and some really earthy tones there. And I've got to say, Brussels sprouts, how they smell and how they look are the ones that are making my mouth water right now. So I like to combine a little bit of cooked, a little bit of raw. I'm going to place some kidney beans next to it. Again, adds a nice lot of colour, fibre and phytonutrients, all of which our microbiota in our large gut just feast on. They party on this sort of food, folks. And I might then place my green leafies on the side too. So in order to hone in on the mindfulness aspects, I thought I might demonstrate for you how I might cut a little bit of coriander. This is just cutting herb, right? But we could actually do it in a super mindful manner. How, you ask me? Well, placing the coriander on the board, I immediately, of course, again, it's the color. I notice the featheriness and the softness of the leaves, as opposed to the rigidity, the relative rigidity of the stems. I notice the roots there as well. I notice my left hand stabilizing the stems as I curl my fingers around the handle of the knife, place my 2 feet on the ground squarely, and then chop through. I love cutting coriander because it creates a crunch, and I love the sound of it. I love the texture as the knife slices through. And you know what? Immediately what pops up is the fact that I've just broken through some cell membranes within the coriander. That's released aromatic molecules that have gone straight up to the back of my nasal cavity, and it's stimulated my olfactory receptors. And I immediately think of mum. I'm actually originally from Bangladesh, and so coriander plays a really big role in mum's cooking, and mum loves it. So she showers all the food with coriander. So I immediately think of mum. And then, of course, having a mind like everybody else, my mind goes to, how is my mum? And then worry about my mum. And so I notice that. I notice that mindfully. I acknowledge, that's me worrying about mum. Let's draw the attention back to the coriander and keep chopping, noticing the crunch, appreciating the smell, appreciating the texture, the color, the increase in surface area as I'm cutting through it. And I'm going to place that in the sort of salsa that I've pre-prepared of the tomato and the onion. In it, we're going to mindfully pour in some lemon juice and some olive oil, which is good stuff. And get into it with my fingers. I feel the oil running through the entire contents of the bowl. I feel the onion's texture. I feel the softer, more moist texture of the tomato, and I can smell the olive oil and the coriander running through. And then I'll add it to my grain bowl. So on top of that goes a little bit more protein and a bit more moisture with the cottage cheese I've got here. You can add whatever cheese you like. I'm going to add a boiled egg, again, for a bit of added protein as well. I've got an 18-year-old son that needs something quite solid, and he doesn't associate vegetables with solidity. I'm going to grab, for an extra treat, some toasted almonds, flaked almonds and pistachios that I earlier prepared, that I'm going to throw on top of those Brussels sprouts to dress those up. Like I told you, I've got a real soft corner for Brussels sprouts. I think they deserve all the attention you can give them. And I'm going to throw over some guacamole that I blended up earlier on, bit of avocado, some monounsaturated fat, which is brilliant for you, but First and foremost, it tastes super nice. And last of all, I'm going to throw over some grated berries known as sumac, which is a Middle Eastern berry. But really all I want to do is show off a little bit of, I want that gourmet look, that sort of cafe style look. And there you have it. A total grain bowl, absolutely packed full of phytonutrients, color, flavor, and yeah, hopefully satisfaction and joy. Thanks for joining us for another video.